All right, let's get started. This is the Recognizing Movement Compensation panel. We have an amazing array of panelists here, and what I would love to do is start off by getting a pretty solid definition of movement compensation from anyone on this panel. So I'm going to open this up to anybody. First person who talks wins. Provide the crowd with a solid definition of movement compensation. What is that?
All right, I'll start it off. So basically, moving around either pain or dysfunction while trying to move through range of motion with load or without load.
I dig it. Anything to add?
I'm going to add to that. So you're going to compensate when you're either lacking mobility, stability, or strength. And you want to get the task done, so you find another way to do it.
We should just add one more thing, and that is that it's your body solving a problem with its available resources. And it's a more positive piece of language than movement error or movement fault. So we're saying, hey, there's a rationale for why you may be moving in a less effective way or a less transferable way, but it's not necessarily bad. It just may be less effective. It may not even predispose you for more injury. So we're trying to change the language around error, fault, that idea.
So it might not necessarily be bad. So, okay, so why is it important for coaches to identify movement compensation in their athletes?
Well, I'll take it from a strength coach perspective. If I'm training an athlete for a sport or whatever they're doing outside the gym, I want them to move as efficiently as possible. So if they're going to move as efficiently as possible, they're going to get the task done better and easier. This has a whole bunch of desirable effects. A, their performance is better, but it also transfers over to future training in that this current training is going to have less impact on tomorrow's training and the next day. So there's a cumulative effect to all of this.
When you say less impact, less negative impact, right? So if
it's just not going to be as hard today because I'm moving more efficiently, so I'm not going to be as tired out for tomorrow.
Right, so positive impact.
Yeah,
so if we can move more efficiently today, if we can recognize movement compensation, get our athletes moving more efficiently, there's transferability into future workouts or other endeavors that are even outside of the gym.
One of the things that we are trying to expand, we're doing here, it's not just about metabolic health anymore. It's not just about cardiovascular health anymore. We're looking at how do these skills transfer to other sports, especially as more and more of the sophisticated coaches in the crowd are beginning to coach more and more athletes who aren't just CrossFit, aren't just here for health and fitness. So one of the things we have to do is reduce the session cost, the total cost metabolically, physically, energetically on tissues so that the athlete can actually go do their sport. And that's one of the hidden benefits of efficiency and technique-driven training.
I love that. I think often when we think about movement compensation, we think about injury risk. So are there injury risks with compensatory movement? And if there are, how high is that risk?
I think you have to say, yes, there's always a possibility for that, but at the same time, there's always a possibility for injury as someone walks into your gym and could trip over something and fall. So there's degrees of everything, and the degrees of how much we should be paying attention and to what is always going to kind of vary from person to person. But in general, you should try and clean up as much as you can, but also understand that there's so many different layers to it. So trying to grab the biggest stuff that you can while you can, and then addressing some of the smaller stuff that it could be, because what you see in front of you may not be exactly the root cause of things, but that might help the issue in the situation or in that hour that you have with everyone, but it is kind of the pre and post where the real magic can happen.
And I think one of the key words is efficiency, too. But the other thing I use with my clients is talking about energy leaks. And sometimes we need to change or reframe how we talk to them. For the fear aspect, we don't want to be negative and get in their head, because fear can change movement alone. So also thinking about the energy leak, how can we clean that up? Is this a compensation that maybe they need and find the best compensation? Because maybe they have a structural issue that we're not going to change. So they need to be able to compensate, but let's find the best compensation. And also, like you said, maybe it's not the root cause. Maybe if there's pain or what hurts could actually be what's working really well. Something else isn't working. We find that, clean that up, get that working better. Then the area that's maybe troublesome goes away.
I think often there's some confusion between pain and injury. So what is the difference there? Can I be in pain and still train, or am I injured?
Pain is not a great indicator of overall function and ability. Most of us up here probably right now are in a lot of pain. I know Kelly's.
How many of you all are pain-free? Oh, yeah. Wait, whoa. What happened? You are the best of the best, and exactly right. You just made the point.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we catastrophize pain way too much, especially the healthcare industry. Oh, you have pain? Okay, don't do that. That hurts. Whoa, you have full range of motion with strength while you're working out and a little pain before and after? Okay, work out more. I mean, it's really, don't catastrophize, don't turn pain into a limitation if it's not a real functional limitation.
If someone comes in because their knee is sore from a big run yesterday, right, they can do their job, they can occupy their role in society, they can do their thing, then they're not injured. And a coach should help quickly be able to say, hey, that doesn't sound or smell musculoskeletal. Let's go get you some help or not appropriate for training today. Or let's see if we can self-soothe, desensitize, decongest, or restore your range of motion. Because a lot of times we see pain associated with a specific position or pattern that's no longer serving that person. It's a strategy that worked. Now it's become sensitized. One of the best tools that every coach on the planet has is that if we move people towards better technique, more efficient, complete range of motion, oftentimes that's enough to change how their brain is perceiving the painful stimulus. So one of the things you can do as a coach is say, well, I see your shoulder hurts and you also can't put your arm over your head. If we just make it so you can put your arm over your head, oftentimes we get pain in the bargain. So it can be an important piece of information, but it definitely does not mean injury.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about coaching and recognizing these patterns. So first off, when and where is the best time to actually determine whether somebody's has a movement compensation or not? Meaning, do I have to wait to the workout? Is it during the warm-up? Is it right when they walk in the door? Jesse, I'd love to hear your answer on this.
I like to try and find movement compensations and poor movement patterns when no one is expecting that you're paying attention to them. So when they are walking in the door, carrying their bag, getting out of their car, turning around and picking up a dumbbell, putting weight on the bar, there's a lot of clues that they leave on the floor for you to kind of pick up, because any sort of athlete, and assuming that you have good coaches, which we'll assume that everybody does, is going to coach you very, very well, and you guys are going to break the best movement pattern, the best movement screens possible. And as athletes, you're going to work through some pain, and you're going to be able to do some stuff, and I'm going to ask you, hey, how you feeling? You're going to say, I feel great. But when you wince when you're picking up a dumbbell, or I watch you walk in and you're dragging your bag, when they're unexpecting, you can't lie. So when you're walking in the door and you see someone limping, you see a shoulder this way, that way, or they're kind of doing this with their neck, those are clues for you that something is wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to know exactly what's wrong, but there's something that's wrong. Start to address it, figure it out, and just pay attention to how they move, because it's a clue to how they're going to kind of move in the future.
Remember, we're viewing this all through the coach's eye. We're all coaches up here. So one of the things we're trying to do with people coming in is get them to know their body and who they are today. Like what's going on in their life, how they handle the last training, what's going on in their sleep and travel. So one of the reasons we do skilled guided warm-ups, we don't just let our athletes warm up on their own, is that I want to understand all the variables before we get into the skill and to the hard pieces. And that first 15 minutes of getting the athlete a chance to know herself again, to understand what's stiff, what's not working, what feels tight, then there are no surprises. And by the way, we also do warm-up sets. So as we do the movements with the empty barbell, we can figure everything out. That gives us plenty of time to change some of the workout variables so that we can have this person continue to train. Jesse knows 10,000 skill transfer exercises for powerlifting. Even if you come in not being able to move anything but your wrist, you're going to train today with Jesse, because he's got ways to be able to move, limit range, slow things down the way every CrossFit coach does.
The gym is the safest place to train. It's where we have the least amount of injury risk. So then I'm assuming the greatest risk with movement compensation is efficiency, a lack of efficiency, right? Spilling out energy, a reduction in power output. So when we're trying to fix this with our athletes, here's the million-dollar question. How do I get them on board? I see something. I need to have them move a different way. I need to have them fix it. How do I get them to comply?
How many of your athletes come in and they're perfect and can do everything day one? Everyone, they're like, oh yeah, those are perfect. That never happens. So the idea is, before every session, if I worked with Jesse hundreds of times, and he'll tell me, here's the goal today. This is your intention. This is the skill or the aspect of what we're trying to do. So everyone's on the same page. There are no surprises. So that when I come in and say, hey, we agreed on this plan, that you were going to do this with your feet or this with your butt or this with your shoulder. You're not doing that because you're fatiguing or breathing hard or getting stressed or you're scared, whatever. Doesn't matter what the mechanism is. Then we can stop and take sort of reassessment of what that is.
I would say almost all of us have subconscious dysfunction. We all move in a way that we might not realize is as efficient. So as coaches, can we make them aware of the dysfunction? Now they have a chance to change it. If we don't bring it up, they don't know.
I think the other piece to what you're saying is the gym is the safest place to kind of move and get these things done. Where's the most dangerous place? It's actually when you're playing your sport or really trying to compete. And the underlying message here is if you don't want to get hurt, stop competing. But since none of you are going to do that, just understanding that that is a possibility when you really let loose and you start to kind of forget and you just kind of get in that zone. In order to buy in there, the answer is performance. Like, just try this and then go out there. If your performance is better, you'll come back for more. So understanding where the dysfunction really matters and how it can rear its ugliest head, and then understanding that that's what matters the most for people. You get that better, you get buy-in immediately.
The idea always is, where is the place where the athlete's going to come and learn about themselves and understand themselves? That's the gym. Because they may not be exposed to ranges or positions at speed in their sport and lifestyle or their job, but they can come in and we can actually decompress, slow things down, work the problem, still get fit, still get stronger. But I want us to change and think, hey, this is not just fitness, this is diagnostics. So I'm always running multiple bottom lines, and the gym may be the only place where we can truly understand what's happening because we can take these very classical shots of controlled movement patterning.
Okay, another thing. So I am a coach in the crowd here. Give me some examples of what movement compensation looks like in the CrossFit gym, in the affiliate. What are some examples? Maybe with shoulders or the hip or the knee or the back. What are some good examples that they can key into and say, okay, yeah, this is something that's wrong, and they are no longer as efficient as they can be because of it.
As a strength coach watching someone squat in a rack, it's very visual when you see they're either leaning one way, or so tilted one way, or leaning one way. And to just tell them to use both legs evenly doesn't seem to work, or to straighten up or whatever. So that's one that I see is very common. How do you guys fix that?
I think another one is watching how they move how they initiate the movement, but also seeing their breathing pattern. For me, that's the foundation. Where are they starting? How are they stabilizing? A lot of times I find that maybe where they lose core pressure could be also correlate to where they're having pain in a movement. So thinking, can they stabilize properly? Can they breathe properly? If they can, okay, now we're moving on from there.
We have to be a little bit patient when they're under some sort of metabolic load or actual heavy-ish load, 70, 80%, because that's when you really have to try, and your compensation starts to end, and you can see the dysfunction that starts to come out. So if you can't recognize something kind of coming in, they're going to break your pattern for a while, and then eventually, again, they can't hide. And whether that's breathing heavy or having something heavy on your back, that's when it's really going to show. But I mean, from ankles collapsing and squats, knees coming in, the chin up, chin down. I mean, these are all indicators of something being wrong. And we can go ahead and put them in columns and say that this is this, but individually you're going to run into such variation that as long as you see something is wrong and then you start asking about what's going on, let me see your overhead, this, that, or you run through a moving screen or whatever it is, then you can start to kind of fine-tune things. But as humans, we're built to see things that are different. So if you're just watching, you're squatting great, wait, what was that? And then you know something's there, and if they repeat it a couple times, it wasn't just I slipped or a something, then that's something you need to pay attention to.
Every physician, every chiro, every physical therapist, we all agree on what the shoulder should be able to do. How much extension you should have, how much internal rotation you have, how much overhead you should have. So if you just pause for a second and you see someone doing something crazy and you were like, wow, I haven't been able to cue that out. And you say, can you put your arms over your head? And this is your overhead. That is your problem. And what you're seeing is any deviation from efficient movement or wobbling is an attempt to buy capacity and slack to solve a problem. So if you don't have movement baselines as part of your understanding, how much should the ankle move? How much should the hip move? If you don't have that language, it makes it a lot harder to understand what you're doing, and you end up playing the same games over and over. Also, this isn't just a coach job. The athlete is responsible for her movement. The athlete working out is also responsible for coaching and co-coaching the athletes they're working with. So we share the burden. So everyone is on board with, hey, what are you doing? Why is your left foot turned out and your right foot straight? Oh, thank you. I didn't even know that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, we'll save the question and answer for the end, and we're getting to there. I know there are probably a ton of questions in the crowd. I just lost my train of thought. So I had a great question for you. Okay, so when we're talking about movement compensation, it's a little bit of normative range of motion, efficient technique, and what the athlete is essentially trying to do is compensate their movement to get as close as that as possible. But there's some underlying condition that's going on. Is that somewhat correct?
Well, look, someone may not know what to do. They don't know what to do. So the first order of business is we cue them, because that's a movement control issue. That's a technique issue. We can call it technique. Then we can go down the line of what's happening. But remember, a job as a coach, particularly in this environment, is to uncover problems. And we do that by making you do more than 3 reps. We do that by making you breathe hard. We do that by making you change movement patterns. We do that by making you go fast. We change it by saying, here's a barbell, now do it with a kettlebell. Now do it with a dumbbell. Now do it on fire. Now do it on fire where you're competing with your friends. If I can't elicit movement mistakes in you, my training is not hard enough, it's not gnarly enough, it's not heavy enough. But if you can't come back, then I've just set you on fire and I'm going to put you in the dumpster in the corner.
That kind of matches what we tend to talk about a lot in the level 1, and that's threshold training. So what do I want to do? I want to push you to the point where you start making these mistakes, and then as a coach, it's up to me at that point to start solving those problems.
You just add, sorry, it's not up to you. It's up to the person to identify that they have gone out of the lane. We all agreed this is what good movement looks like. And if you can't feel that, then we're going to take a second. It's okay to pause the music and stop everyone and be like, hang on. This jackass over here is not playing by the rules we all agreed to as a class. Or you can pull up and decide and say, hey, give this a try. Let's slow this down. I know that you're now not playing the same RX game everyone is. That's okay. That's not our intention.
What if how we're compensating is not about something, internal within us, it's task driven? What if my movement compensation is because I think it's the best technique to solve this problem, this task in front of me, Isabel, something like that? How does that affect other workouts or my movement in other endeavors, even outside of the gym?
So connecting, basically, if you're looking at movement compensation, someone's trying to solve a problem. Kelly said that when we started, trying to get the task done. If that movement compensation matches our points of performance or doesn't deviate from our points of performance, maybe it's not a problem, right? We've seen different techniques used in a variety of movements and events out here. So it's very context specific: load, speed, volume, things like that. If it works in the gym, then you'll try and take it. Look at Michael Johnson, right? Michael Johnson does not have a prototypical sprinting technique. Everybody said he has a strange technique until he started breaking world records, and then we thought maybe we don't understand sprinting technique. Same thing here. My guideline for that would be look at the points of the performance of the movement, as we talk about at the level 1. If we're adhering to those, let's evaluate this technique and see what kind of results you can get in the gym with it. If you're getting good results with that, let's take it outside the gym if it correlates to something you're doing outside the gym.
The results aren't based off of one task alone. So if I'm constantly practicing something that would be extremely inefficient as I start to move outside of 30 reps, but I can move faster with this, we'll call it poor technique, for up to 30 reps, is that a problem?
I don't think you'll see poor technique be more efficient. I just don't think you'll see that. And we say it at the level 1 that at the highest levels of competition, it's good technique or correct technique that dominates and wins. So I can't think of an example where someone comes up with a technique that we would look at as poor. And why would it be poor? Because it violates some point of performance or something that we understand about movement, where we look at that and say, well, in this case, let's use that poor technique to be better, because I don't think that happens.
Yeah, I like that. So let's use the CrossFit Games as an example. Do we, and I'm picking on Isabel because I think we see that a lot. Isabel, 30 snatches at 135 pounds or 90 pounds. And what we tend to see a lot is rounded backs and slinging the weight up and some violations of points of performance. So some level of compensation, right? And when we get past 30 reps or you add more weight onto the bar, it's really, for most people, no longer the right technique to perform that task, right? So you're very short-sighted in your approach. Do we see that at the games? If Isabel was to pop up as just the workout, are we going to see our top athletes, the podium athletes, the athletes that are winning the games with extremely rounded backs, pulling early, doing things that we might see happen within the walls of the gym with some of those athletes?
A lot of the mid-level people, or the middle to upper tier, they'll do those movements. They'll do them really fast. They'll do great. But they're wrecked the next day. Their low backs are completely fried, and they're ruined for the rest of the competition. So it's really the top people. They do it perfectly and still fast and efficiently, and their backs don't hurt the next day.
You're still seeing Tia hinge straight over, and her foot pressure is rock solid, and all her corners are crisp. She's just using a slightly different technique at that skill, and that is exactly right. How do we reduce the session cost? So you'll see athletes change strategy to solve a problem because they only have to do 30 at this weight. If suddenly that's a 205-pound snatch for women, you're going to see a completely different strategy. The foundations of how the body is organized remain the same.
So if someone does this to win, they'll cut their arm off to win too. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter if they're a little efficient. If they win, it's done. I think Ivan Abajev said, "Do it perfectly or win." That's it, right? So if you're in competition, that's there. So what we don't want is when someone is winning or at the top and they have less than great technique just to get there, that being mimicked as the right way because they won.
If I'm a coach in the gym, how much movement compensation is acceptable? How much of that deviation from the right way to do the movement is acceptable? And if there's no one way to answer that, what are some questions that I should be asking myself as I watch people move to figure that out?
It's going to be different for every athlete. Some compensations may be safe for them. Other people, they might already be in pain with that type of compensation. So I think we have to look at having the tools to break down the movement, whether they're already loaded, take some load off, and just see if one cue maybe changes the movement in there. But it's hard to, it depends with each athlete.
How many of you have been CrossFitting for longer than 10 years? Longer than 15 years? Right? So part of our goal is saying you have to come out at 1 rep or at 1,000,000 reps, but look at our adaptive athletes. We can get them into the best positions available to them, and that's still enough. It doesn't mean that we don't refine our technique. Go work with Mike Bergner today, and I guarantee you, if you've been Olympic lifting for 100 years, Mike will still make you a better lifter. If you're a world record holder, you still come to Jesse for coaching. So the technique efficiency drama never goes away. We're always highlighting because that ultimately is the differentiating feature of being the first or second. But keep in mind that we're always having our foot on that gas, and we have a minute to get it right.
And to that point, training doesn't stop or it doesn't just start when you're perfect, right? So you're going to train with these flaws in your technique, work on them, but you're also going to train.
Are they aware that they're moving poorly, or are they like, I am? Are they aware of it and go, that's how I was taught to do so? Are they aware of it and they're trying to fix it, but they're just not quite able to quite yet? So you either, in that position, you start talking about stuff to do beforehand, or, hey, maybe if I cue you, this will help. So their understanding of what's kind of going on, I think, is also incredibly important. And to your point, kind of just the communication, when someone's in the middle, at number 22, like, you really got to work on. They're like, what? What do you want me to do? You got to choose, choose your battles and like when you're going to talk and how and when you want to fix that.
So I see somebody's moving inefficiently, let's say in the shoulder. How do I know what the root cause is. What are some things I should be looking at or asking myself to determine, okay, I see something here, but is that really the problem, or is there something more up or downstream that is causing this?
You have no idea. So you really have to isolate each joint and figure out, can that joint move normally? Yes, it can. Okay, the knee, the ankle, the hip. Yeah, the left hip doesn't move well at all. That might be the problem. Maybe it doesn't move well because the right shoulder doesn't move well. You got to really kind of figure out all these compensating movements that they've learned. Doesn't mean they're necessarily injured. Probably are prone to getting hurt in the future. So find out what doesn't work well and then see if you can mobilize it, get it more mobile, or make it more stable if there's a weakness on the posterior chain. They've got big glutes, but they don't use them at all. That happens all the time.
So that will be through cueing. Everything he said right there, that whole diagnostic process for an advanced coach happens like this. I'm cueing knees out. Well, the knee didn't go out when I told him to put the knee out, so I'm watching what kind of depth they're getting. I'm watching at the same time, are they rocking forward on the ball of the foot and the heels coming off the ground? What's their torso position? What's their lumbar doing? I'm seeing all this, so my next cue might be something different. Now I may have to slow them down. All right, it's not happening at speed, so I'm going to slow them down. I keep cueing and cueing and cueing, and that's going to give me information and feedback to the ultimate point of stopping them and then starting to do some diagnostics with them to figure out what's going wrong, depending on the severity of the compensation or the error that I'm finding.
And then I think the other option, too, is having a team. When you try a bunch of cues, when you break down the movement, if it's not changing it, if it's not making sense, or you switch to the other side, maybe the left hip's tight and maybe they're deviating into the left hip, maybe it's a right hip issue, or back and forth, having the team to go to. So have a PT, have a chiro, have a movement specialist, someone where they can break down even more, get their history. Maybe it's something, maybe it's a fear issue. Maybe they hurt their back years ago and they're just scared to get below parallel because that's the last time they hurt themselves was when they went below parallel. So asking the right questions.
We don't know a lot. I'm asked to interpret very quickly a lot of data. Jesse, there's something wrong with my bench press, right? I need a physio. I'm hiring a coach for a specific thing. CrossFit's strength is its hyper locality, that no one doesn't know their athletes, and it's the first time we've ever seen them. You know exactly all the people you're coaching, and you know what their injury histories are. That's what's so powerful, is that I come in and say, we're snatching today, but you're going from muscle snatches from the high hang. Why? Because you just don't have the range. Cool. We're going to smoke you doing that stuff. So we are able to understand, take that information and that history of working with the people in our gyms at that hyperlocality and then adjusting our program accordingly. It's less mysterious. If you should know everything about the way your athletes are going to move because they're your athletes. You own them. You own all their dysfunction. It's probably your fault. Second is that you already took them through a warm-up. You should not be, there should be no surprises here, right?
All right. Thank you so much for being here and participating in this panel. Let's give the crowd a round of applause first. Panelists, a round of applause. Karin, a round of applause for screaming. And my man, Noah. All right. Thank you so much.